The mountains of Afghanistan looked different to Rodriguez this time. As the helicopter descended toward their forward operating base, he found himself seeing the terrain through new eyes, automatically assessing sight lines, wind patterns, and potential firing positions. The intensive training with Thompson had changed not just his shooting technique, but his entire way of observing and understanding the tactical environment. 3 weeks into the deployment, Rodriguez's team received intelligence about a high-value target operating in a remote village nestled in a valley approximately 15 kilometers from their base. The target was reportedly a bomb maker responsible for several attacks on coalition forces, and the mission was to capture or eliminate him. The approach to the village required a grueling 12-hour movement through mountainous terrain. Rodriguez carried his sniper rifle along with standard infantry equipment, bringing his total load to nearly 80 pounds. The altitude and thin air made the movement even more challenging, but he found himself drawing on the endurance and mental toughness training Thompson had emphasized. As they reached the observation point overlooking the target village, Rodriguez set up his firing position while his teammates established a perimeter. Through his scope, he could see the village spread out below them, approximately 800 meters away. The morning sun created long shadows that would affect target identification and engagement. The intelligence indicated that the target would likely appear sometime during the morning hours, but the exact timing was uncertain. Rodriguez settled into his position and began the patient process of surveillance, systematically scanning buildings and movement patterns in the village below. 2 hours passed without any sign of their target. Rodriguez found his mind wandering to thoughts of home and family, a dangerous habit that Thompson had warned against. He forced himself to refocus, using the breathing techniques he had learned to maintain alertness despite the tedious nature of surveillance work. At approximately 1,030 hours, Rodriguez spotted movement that caught his attention. A man emerged from one of the buildings that intelligence had identified as a possible safe house. Through his scope, Rodriguez could see that the individual matched the physical description of their target, but positive identification would require more observation. The man moved with apparent caution, frequently looking around and staying close to buildings that would provide cover from observation. His behavior suggested awareness of potential surveillance, which supported the intelligence assessment that this was indeed their target. Rodriguez keyed his radio to alert his team leader while maintaining visual contact with the suspect. Possible target identified, Grid 41 SMD 12345 67890, Building 3, requesting confirmation before engagement. His team leader, Lieutenant Morrison, moved to Rodriguez's position with a spotting scope for additional verification. The suspect had moved into partial concealment behind a low wall, making positive identification more challenging. "Can you maintain eyes on?" Morrison asked quietly. Rodriguez tracked the target through his scope, noting the man's movements and behavior patterns. "Affirm, but he's using cover effectively. I need a clearer view for positive ID." As if responding to their conversation, the suspect moved into an open area approximately 50 meters from his previous position. For the first time, Rodriguez had a clear view of the man's face and could compare it to the photographs they had studied during mission planning. "Positive identification confirmed," Morrison whispered after comparing the visual with their target photos. "You are cleared to engage when you have a clean shot." Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase slightly, but his hands remained steady on the rifle. This was the moment when all of Thompson's training would be put to the ultimate test. The range was approximately 825 meters, with a slight crosswind from the left that would require compensation. He took his time assessing the environmental conditions, remembering Thompson's emphasis on patience and thorough preparation. The wind was gusty but generally consistent from the southwest at approximately 8 to 10 miles per hour. The temperature was cool, which would affect bullet trajectories slightly, and the target was at a lower elevation, requiring a small adjustment to his scope settings. The suspect continued moving around the open area, apparently unaware of the observation team positioned on the mountain above. Rodriguez waited patiently for the optimal moment, when the target would be stationary and clearly exposed. That moment came when the suspect stopped to speak with another individual who had emerged from a nearby building. Both men stood in the open, providing Rodriguez with the clear shot he needed while also presenting an additional threat that might require immediate follow-up engagement. Rodriguez controlled his breathing and began his final shooting sequence. Everything Thompson had taught him seemed to activate automatically. The proper sight picture, smooth trigger control, natural respiratory pause. The rifle fired almost as a surprise, which Rodriguez recognized as the sign of proper trigger technique. Through his scope, Rodriguez saw the target drop immediately. The second individual began running toward the nearest building, presenting Rodriguez with a follow-up target that could potentially compromise the mission if allowed to escape and raise an alarm. Without conscious thought, Rodriguez worked the bolt action of his rifle and acquired the second target. The man was running in an erratic pattern that made tracking difficult, but Rodriguez found himself predicting the movement pattern and leading the target appropriately. The second shot was more challenging due to the target's movement, but Rodriguez felt the same calm confidence he had experienced during Thompson's training exercises. The rifle fired again, and the running figure stumbled and fell. 2 targets down, Rodriguez reported quietly into his radio. Morrison confirmed the kills through his spotting scope and called for the assault team to move in and secure the area. Rodriguez maintained overwatch as his teammates descended toward the village, ready to provide additional sniper support if needed. The village clearing operation proceeded smoothly, with no additional resistance encountered. The assault team confirmed that both individuals Rodriguez had engaged were dead, and a search of the buildings revealed bomb-making materials and intelligence documents that validated their target identification. As they prepared to extract from the area, Morrison approached Rodriguez's position. "Outstanding shooting," he said. "Textbook engagement under difficult conditions." Rodriguez felt a quiet satisfaction, but realized that his emotional response was different from what he might have expected. Instead of excitement or pride, he felt a calm sense of professional accomplishment. The training with Thompson had prepared him not just technically, but mentally for this moment. The extraction movement back to base gave Rodriguez time to reflect on the engagement. Every aspect of the shot sequence had felt natural and controlled, from the environmental assessment to the actual trigger pull. The follow-up shot on the moving target had been particularly challenging, but his response had been automatic rather than panicked. Back at the forward operating base, Rodriguez cleaned his rifle and documented the engagement in his shooting log. The range had been 827 meters for the first shot and approximately 780 meters for the second, with wind conditions that required approximately 1 minute of angle adjustment for windage. That evening, as he sat writing a letter to his family, Rodriguez found himself thinking about Thompson and the training that had prepared him for the day's mission. The quiet instructor had somehow known exactly what skills would be needed and had designed training scenarios that built those capabilities systematically. 2 days later, Rodriguez's team received another mission that would test his abilities in a completely different way. Intelligence reported that a group of insurgents was planning an attack on a supply convoy, and Rodriguez's team was tasked with providing overwatch and sniper support for the convoy's passage through a particularly dangerous stretch of mountain road. The mission required Rodriguez to establish multiple firing positions along the convoy route, moving quickly between positions to maintain coverage as the vehicles progressed. This was exactly the type of dynamic shooting situation that Thompson had emphasized in training. Rodriguez found himself drawing on every skill Thompson had taught him: rapid position changes, quick range estimation, shooting from improvised positions, and maintaining situational awareness while engaging multiple potential targets. The convoy came under attack at the predicted location, with insurgents firing from concealed positions on both sides of the narrow mountain road. Rodriguez engaged targets from 3 different firing positions during the 15-minute firefight, making successful hits at ranges varying from 300 to 650 meters. The combination of accurate sniper fire and aggressive action by the convoy security team quickly suppressed the attack. The convoy sustained minimal damage and no casualties, while intelligence reports later confirmed that several insurgents had been killed or wounded in the engagement. After this second successful mission, Rodriguez began to understand what Thompson had meant about the difference between training and real-world application. The technical skills were important, But the mental preparation and confidence that came from proper training were equally crucial. Word of Rodriguez's shooting performance began to spread within the special operations community. Other snipers sought him out for advice and training tips, which initially made him uncomfortable. He felt like he was simply applying what Thompson had taught him rather than demonstrating any special ability of his own. However, as he began sharing some of Thompson's techniques with other shooters, Rodriguez realized that he had internalized and adapted the training in ways that allowed him to teach it effectively to others. He was no longer simply following Thompson's methods, but had developed his own understanding and approach based on that foundation. During the final months of the deployment, Rodriguez participated in several more high-profile missions, consistently demonstrating the advanced marksmanship skills and tactical awareness that Thompson had developed. His reputation as an exceptional sniper became established not just within his own unit, but throughout the special operations forces operating in the region. As the deployment neared its end, Rodriguez reflected on how much had changed since that first day watching Thompson demonstrate blindfolded shooting on the Virginia training range. The quiet instructor had transformed not just Rodriguez's technical abilities, but his entire approach to his profession and his understanding of what it meant to be truly skilled at something. The flight home gave Rodriguez time to think about what he would do with the skills and knowledge he had gained. Thompson had planted seeds that had grown far beyond simple marksmanship technique, creating a different way of thinking about training, performance, and continuous improvement. Upon returning to Virginia Beach, Rodriguez learned that Thompson had moved on to other assignments and was no longer available for follow-up training. However, the lessons he had taught lived on in Rodriguez and the other team members who had been fortunate enough to work with him. Rodriguez eventually became a senior instructor himself, passing on Thompson's methods to new generations of SEALs while continuing to refine and develop the techniques he had learned. The blindfolded shooting exercise became a standard part of his curriculum, and many students experienced the same revelation that Rodriguez had felt when he first witnessed true expert-level marksmanship. Years later, Rodriguez would often tell his students that the most important thing Thompson had taught him was not any specific technique or procedure, but rather the understanding that there were always higher levels of performance to strive for. The quiet instructor had shown him that expertise was not a destination, but a journey, and that true professionals never stopped learning and improving. The memory of those first shots fired blindfolded under Thompson's guidance remained vivid in Rodriguez's mind, a reminder of the moment when he understood what it truly meant to be a SEAL sniper. It was a lesson that extended far beyond marksmanship, encompassing dedication, humility, continuous learning, and the pursuit of excellence in everything he did. The second week of training with Thompson brought challenges that Rodriguez had never imagined. Each day presented new scenarios designed to push the team beyond their comfort zones and test their ability to adapt under pressure. Thompson's methods were unlike anything they had encountered in their previous training. On Monday morning, the team arrived at the range to find it had been transformed overnight. Smoke machines created a thick haze that reduced visibility to less than 50 meters. Speakers hidden throughout the area played recordings of gunfire, explosions, and shouting voices, creating an audio environment that closely mimicked active combat. Thompson stood in the middle of this chaos, seemingly unaffected by the sensory overload around him. His voice remained calm and clear despite the surrounding noise. Today we work on target engagement in degraded conditions. You'll notice that your normal visual and auditory cues are compromised. This forces you to rely more heavily on your other senses and your training. Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase as he prepared for his turn. The combination of limited visibility and constant noise created a stress response that he recognized from actual combat situations. His palms began to sweat, and he found it difficult to focus on Thompson's instructions. The key, Thompson continued, is not to fight the environment, but to work with it. Use the noise to mask your movement. Use the smoke for concealment. Every obstacle can become an advantage if you approach it correctly. When Rodriguez's turn came, he found himself struggling in ways he hadn't expected. The smoke irritated his eyes and made it difficult to see through his scope clearly. The constant noise made it hard to concentrate, and He found his mind wandering to thoughts of actual combat situations he had experienced. His shots were erratic, and his movement between positions was awkward and inefficient. He felt frustrated and embarrassed, especially when he compared his performance to what Thompson had demonstrated the previous week. Thompson appeared beside him during a brief pause in the exercise. "What's going through your mind right now?" he asked quietly. Rodriguez hesitated, unsure how honest to be. "I'm thinking about Afghanistan," he finally admitted. "Some situations where things went wrong. I guess the noise and smoke are bringing back memories I'd rather not deal with." Thompson nodded knowingly. "That's exactly why we're doing this. Those memories and the emotions they bring up don't disappear just because you're back home. If you don't learn to work with them, they'll work against you when it matters most." Over the next hour, Thompson worked individually with Rodriguez, teaching him breathing techniques and mental strategies for maintaining focus despite distractions. The improvement wasn't immediate, but Rodriguez began to notice subtle changes in how he responded to the stressful environment. Tuesday brought an entirely different challenge. The team was transported to a wooded area several miles from the base, where they found themselves facing a complex scenario that combined marksmanship with tactical movement and decision-making. Thompson had set up multiple target areas throughout the forest, each requiring different approaches and shooting positions. Some targets could only be engaged from specific angles, while others required the shooter to move through difficult terrain to reach an effective firing position. "This is closer to what you'll actually face in the field," Thompson explained as he outlined the exercise. "You won't have the luxury of a prepared firing line or known distances. You'll need to read the terrain, estimate ranges, account for wind and elevation changes, and do it all while maintaining situational awareness." Rodriguez paired up with Johnson for this exercise. They spent the first few minutes studying the terrain and planning their approach to the various target areas. The task seemed overwhelming at first, with so many variables to consider simultaneously. As they began moving through the forest, Rodriguez found himself struggling with range estimation. The uneven terrain and varying vegetation made it difficult to judge distances accurately. His first several shots missed their targets completely, and he felt his confidence beginning to erode. Thompson appeared silently beside them, seeming to materialize out of the forest without making a sound. Rodriguez hadn't heard him approach and was startled by his sudden presence. "You're overthinking this," Thompson observed, watching Rodriguez struggle with his range calculations. "Trust your instincts more. You have more experience than you're giving yourself credit for." He pointed to a target positioned on a hillside about 500 meters away. "Look at that target, and tell me your first impression of the range." Rodriguez studied the target briefly. "Looks like about 450 meters, he said. Thompson smiled slightly. "Now tell me what your calculations say." Rodriguez went through his systematic range estimation process, factoring in the terrain, vegetation, and lighting conditions. After several minutes of analysis, he arrived at an estimate of 520 meters. "Which one feels right?" Thompson asked. Rodriguez hesitated. His training had always emphasized systematic analysis over gut feelings. "The calculation, I suppose. 520 meters. Thompson handed him a laser rangefinder. "Check it." The device read 448 meters. Rodriguez felt a mixture of surprise and confusion. His initial instinct had been much closer to the actual distance than his careful calculations. "Your subconscious mind processes visual information faster and often more accurately than your conscious analytical mind," Thompson explained. "The trick is learning to trust that processing while still using your analytical skills as a backup." This lesson proved to be a turning point for Rodriguez. As the day progressed, he began relying more on his intuitive assessment of situations while using his technical training to confirm and refine his decisions. His shooting accuracy improved dramatically, and he found himself moving through the forest with greater confidence. Wednesday's training focused on long-range shooting under time pressure. Thompson set up targets at distances ranging from 600 to 1,200 meters, each with a time limit for engagement. The pressure was intense, as missing the time window meant automatic failure regardless of shot accuracy. Rodriguez discovered that the time pressure affected his shooting in unexpected ways. He found himself rushing through his normal preparation routine, which led to inconsistent results. Some shots were excellent, while others missed by wide margins. Thompson worked with the entire team on developing streamlined procedures that maintained accuracy while reducing the time required for target engagement. He demonstrated techniques for rapid range estimation, quick wind reading, and efficient scope adjustment that Rodriguez had never seen before. Speed without accuracy is useless, Thompson reminded them repeatedly. But accuracy without speed can get you killed. You need both, and that requires practice until these procedures become automatic. By Thursday, Rodriguez began to see significant improvement in his overall performance. The various skills Thompson had been teaching started to come together in a way that felt natural rather than forced. His confidence returned, but it was a different kind of confidence than he had felt before, more humble and more aware of the complexity of what he was trying to master. Friday brought the most challenging exercise yet. Thompson blindfolded the entire team and led them to unknown positions in the forest. When the blindfolds were removed, each team member found himself alone with a rifle, a map, and a set of target coordinates. Rodriguez found himself on a hillside overlooking a valley he didn't recognize. According to his map, he needed to engage 3 targets at different locations within the next hour. The catch was that he had to find the targets himself using only the coordinate information provided. The first target took him nearly 20 minutes to locate. It was positioned in a way that required him to move to a completely different firing position than where he had started. By the time he engaged it successfully, he was already behind schedule for the remaining targets. The second target was easier to find but presented a difficult shooting problem. The only available firing position required him to shoot through a narrow gap between trees, and the angle was such that a slight error in windage would cause the bullet to strike a tree branch instead of the target. Rodriguez took his time with this shot, using everything Thompson had taught him about reading environmental conditions and trusting his instincts. When he squeezed the trigger, he felt confident about the shot even before he could confirm the hit through his binoculars. The third target proved to be the most challenging. It was positioned at long range, nearly 900 meters away, and the afternoon sun created a glare that made it difficult to see clearly through his scope. Additionally, the wind in the valley was gusty and unpredictable, changing direction every few minutes. With only 15 minutes remaining, Rodriguez felt the pressure mounting. He forced himself to slow down and apply the breathing and focus techniques Thompson had taught him. He took time to really study the wind patterns, watching grass and leaves at different points between his position and the target. When he finally took the shot, Rodriguez felt a sense of calm confidence that was new to him. The bullet struck the target's center mass, and he felt a satisfaction that was different from anything he had experienced in his previous training. As the team regrouped at the end of the exercise, Rodriguez realized that something fundamental had changed in how he approached shooting and tactical problems. He no longer felt the need to rush or prove himself. Instead, he felt comfortable taking the time necessary to do things correctly, trusting in his abilities while remaining aware of his limitations. Thompson gathered the team for a final debrief as the sun began to set. "You've all improved significantly over the past 2 weeks," he said. "But remember that this is just the beginning. The skills we've worked on require constant practice and refinement." He looked at each team member individually before continuing. "The techniques you've learned here will serve you well in your upcoming deployment, but they're not magic. They still require discipline, practice, and the wisdom to know when and how to apply them." Rodriguez felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Thompson. The quiet instructor had challenged him in ways that went beyond simple marksmanship, forcing him to examine and improve fundamental aspects of how he approached his profession. As they prepared to leave the training area, Rodriguez approached Thompson one last time. "Thank you," he said simply. "This has been unlike any training I've ever experienced." Thompson nodded acknowledgement. "Just remember that the real test isn't here on the training range. It's when you're in a situation where lives depend on your abilities. That's when you'll discover what you've really learned." The words stayed with Rodriguez as they drove back to base. In just over a month, he and his team would be deploying to Afghanistan again. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely excited rather than simply confident about the challenges that lay ahead. Marcus Rodriguez never imagined that a routine training exercise would change everything he thought he knew about warfare. The morning started like any other at the Navy SEAL training facility in Virginia Beach. The sun was barely creeping over the horizon when he and his team gathered around their commanding officer for what they believed would be another standard marksmanship drill. Rodriguez had been a SEAL for 8 years, long enough to think he had seen it all. He was confident in his abilities, proud of his record, and respected by his teammates. His shooting skills were above average, and he had completed multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. But on this particular morning, something different was in the air. Their instructor, Chief Petty Officer Williams, stood before the assembled team with an unusual expression. Behind him stood a man Rodriguez had never seen before. The stranger was tall, lean, with weathered skin and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him without making it obvious. He wore standard military fatigues with no visible rank insignia, which immediately caught Rodriguez's attention. "Gentlemen," Chief Williams began, "today we're going to do something different. This is Petty Officer First Class Jake Thompson. He's going to demonstrate some advanced techniques that might challenge what you think you know about precision shooting." The team exchanged glances. Rodriguez noticed that several of his teammates seemed skeptical. They had all been through extensive training, and most of them considered themselves expert marksmen. What could this quiet stranger possibly show them that they hadn't already mastered? Thompson stepped forward without saying a word. He moved with an economy of motion that Rodriguez found interesting, but not particularly impressive. The man seemed ordinary enough, perhaps even unremarkable compared to some of the larger, more imposing SEALs Rodriguez had served with. "Before we begin," Thompson finally spoke, his voice calm and measured, "I want you all to understand something. What you're about to see isn't about showing off or proving superiority. It's about understanding that in combat, conditions are never ideal. The enemy doesn't wait for perfect weather, perfect lighting, or perfect positioning." Rodriguez felt a slight irritation. He and his team had been in real combat situations. They understood about adverse conditions and battlefield stress. This lecture seemed unnecessary, almost condescending. Thompson continued, "Today, we're going to simulate some of those less-than-ideal conditions. You'll each take turns attempting shots while dealing with various distractions and obstacles. Then, I'll demonstrate the same shots under the same conditions." The team was led to the shooting range, where targets had been set up at distances ranging from 300 to 800 meters. Rodriguez noticed that the targets weren't the standard bullseye patterns they usually used. Instead, they were silhouettes designed to represent actual human targets, which added a psychological element to the exercise. Chief Williams explained the rules. Each team member would attempt 3 shots at different distances while wearing a blindfold until the moment of shooting. They would have to rely on their spotter to guide them to the target, remove the blindfold, acquire the target, and fire within 10 seconds. Rodriguez volunteered to go first. He had always been competitive and wanted to set a high standard for his teammates. His spotter, Petty Officer Johnson, positioned him correctly and gave him the initial bearing to the 400-meter target. "Blindfold off, go," Johnson commanded. Rodriguez ripped away the blindfold and immediately began scanning for his target through his rifle scope. The sudden exposure to bright sunlight after the darkness of the blindfold was disorienting. His eyes struggled to adjust, and precious seconds ticked away as he tried to locate the target. By the time he found the silhouette and steadied his aim, 8 seconds had already passed. He squeezed the trigger with barely a second to spare. The shot went wide, missing the target completely. Rodriguez felt a flush of embarrassment, but told himself it was just the unfamiliar conditions. His second attempt at 600 meters went slightly better, but still only managed to hit the outer edge of the target. His third shot at 300 meters was closer to center mass, but nothing to be proud of given the relatively short distance. One by one, his teammates took their turns. The results were similar across the board. Even their best marksmen struggled with the blindfold exercise. The combination of visual disorientation, time pressure, and unusual target acquisition proved more challenging than anyone had expected. After the last team member finished, Thompson stepped up to the firing line. He moved with the same unhurried confidence he had displayed earlier. Rodriguez watched carefully, curious to see if this mysterious instructor was all talk or if he actually possessed the skills to back up his quiet confidence. Thompson's spotter gave him the bearing for the 800-meter target, the longest distance any of them would attempt that day. Rodriguez noticed that Thompson's breathing remained steady and controlled even as he prepared for what was obviously a challenging shot. Blindfold off, go. The transformation was immediate and startling. Thompson's movements became fluid and precise without appearing rushed. The blindfold came away smoothly, and his rifle seemed to flow to his shoulder as if it were an extension of his body. Rodriguez could see Thompson's eyes tracking quickly but methodically to acquire the target. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. The rifle cracked, and without even waiting to confirm the hit, Thompson was already transitioning to his second position for the 600-meter shot. His spotter confirmed what everyone could see through their binoculars, a perfect center mass hit on the distant target. The second shot was even more impressive. Thompson seemed to have found his rhythm, moving with a mechanical precision that looked almost effortless. Another center mass hit, this time in just 4 seconds from blindfold removal to trigger pull. For his final shot at 300 meters, Thompson did something that made Rodriguez's jaw drop. Instead of using his spotter's initial bearing, he deliberately positioned himself facing the wrong direction. When the blindfold came off, he had to rotate nearly 180 degrees to find his target. Even with this additional challenge, Thompson acquired and engaged the target in 6 seconds, placing his shot directly in the center of the silhouette. The range fell silent except for the distant sound of wind moving through the trees. Rodriguez looked around at his teammates and saw his own amazement reflected in their faces. What they had just witnessed wasn't simply good marksmanship. It was something else entirely, a level of skill and battlefield awareness that transcended normal training. Thompson lowered his rifle and turned to face the group. His expression remained calm, showing no sign of satisfaction or pride in what he had just accomplished. It was as if what they had all found extraordinary was simply routine for him. "Questions?" he asked quietly. Rodriguez found his voice first. "How? I mean, what we just saw. How is that even possible?" Thompson considered the question for a moment before answering. "You're all excellent shooters under normal conditions. But combat isn't normal. In a real firefight, you might be moving to a new position under enemy fire. You might have been lying prone for hours and need to engage targets immediately upon standing. You might be dealing with smoke, debris, or chemical irritants that affect your vision." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "The blindfold exercise isn't about blindfolded shooting. It's about training your mind and body to function effectively when your normal processes are disrupted. It's about building automatic responses that work even when you're operating under extreme stress." Chief Williams stepped forward. "Petty Officer Thompson is going to be working with our unit for the next 2 weeks. He's here to share some techniques that might be useful in your upcoming deployment." Rodriguez felt a mixture of excitement and humility. The upcoming deployment to Afghanistan would be his 4th, but after what he had just witnessed, he realized there might be more to learn than he had thought. As the team prepared to return to base, Rodriguez approached Thompson. "What you did out there, is that something that can be taught, or is it just natural ability?" Thompson looked at him with those steady eyes. "Everything can be learned if you're willing to work for it, but it requires you to let go of thinking you already know enough. Are you willing to do that?" Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. He had always prided himself on being open to improvement, but he realized that pride itself might have been holding him back. Watching Thompson's demonstration had shown him that there were levels of proficiency he hadn't even known existed. The drive back to base was quieter than usual. Each team member seemed lost in thought, processing what they had experienced. Rodriguez stared out the window at the passing Virginia landscape and found himself questioning assumptions he had held for years about his own capabilities and the nature of expert marksmanship. That evening, as he lay in his bunk, Rodriguez replayed the day's events in his mind. Thompson's performance had been impressive, but it was more than just the accuracy of his shots. It was the complete absence of wasted motion, the seamless integration of mind and body, and the way he had made the extraordinary appear routine. For the first time in years, Rodriguez felt like a beginner again. It was an uncomfortable feeling, but also an exciting one. He had 2 weeks to learn whatever Thompson was willing to teach, and he was determined to make the most of the opportunity. As he drifted off to sleep, Rodriguez couldn't shake the image of Thompson's calm, focused expression as he had effortlessly engaged those targets. Tomorrow's training couldn't come soon enough.